Hi guys. So when we left off, we were at kind of a cliffhanger. Jack was trying to cross the river and he ended up falling in, and is kind of just like being swept away by the current. And the last line was he sees something and he looks into his eyes and he sees a big white whale. So we're gonna have to see what's gonna happen next. Chapter 20. I was sure I dreamed the whole thing. After all, there are no whales in freshwater rivers. Still, the memory of it was so clear. The whale's skin was so smooth and the water rolled cleanly over its folds and creases. I felt its buoyancy as it floated along beside me, gently guiding me out of the rushing current. I could still see those eyes, dark and mysterious as the ocean. But gradually, the dream receded. Try as I might to hold on to it, to the feeling of being lifted and held and cared for, almost loved, I became aware of sounds and smells and a whopping headache that were not in my dream. Against my wishes, my eyelids fluttered open. I jerked awake as I stared into a pair of glassy, unseeing eyes that held me fixed in their gaze. My heart raced. Then, as my vision cleared, I realized it was just a pair of wire-rimmed spectacles perched on a nightstand next to a very large bed. A very large bed that made me feel very small. Goldilocks came to mind, but the ache in my head cut that story short. I'd have to tell Early. Where was Early? Had he fallen into the river too? What was this place? I bolted upright. My head pounded with the shift in position. I touched the throbbing lump on my temple and felt the stickiness of blood in my hair. I must have gotten a pretty good bump from a log or rock and passed out, and my ankle felt raw from being scraped against the rough bark. But somehow I'd gotten from the stream to this place, a room with wooden beams in the ceiling and logs for walls. I ran my hands over the patchwork quilt covering the bed. Pots clanked in the next room and my mouth watered from the smell of the simmering meat. I was drawn to it like a kid who hadn't eaten in some time. Standing on the cold wooden floorboards, I was relieved to find that my foot didn't seem to be broken. My ankle was a little tender, but I could walk on it. I shivered in my still damp t-shirt and shorts, and, not knowing who might be in the next room, I padded over to peek through the door. Peering out, I felt as if I were in some kind of exotic jungle, but hanging from above, instead of leaves and vines, there were animal furs and snowshoes, hooks, nets, and fishing lures, wooden bird decoys, mounted fish, and maps. A bearskin lay on the floor, its teeth bared, its eyes looking straight at me. I scanned the room for a glimpse of Early's tartan red jacket, then noticed something out of the corner of my eye. As I turned my head to the right, I jumped back a bit at the gleaming knife stuck right in the wall, not 2 inches from my face. It was an eerie sight and could have been a good indication that some crazy woodsman lived there, but I couldn't just stay put. I had to find Early, and there was simmering meat, but mostly I had to find Early. I heard footsteps, not small padded steps like Early would make, big lumbering footsteps like a giant would make. That must have been what it was, in fact, as a huge shadow passed over the sidewall, darkening everything in its path. Now I felt less like Goldilocks and more like that boy named Jack after he'd climbed the magic beanstalk. I waited for the deep voice of a giant to bellow, fee, fi, fo, fum. Then I heard Early, his voice clear and a little too loud, filling me with relief. You got a lot of stuffed animals in here. Do you have any timber rattlesnakes? No, the man answered. Elephants? No. Do you think it's true that elephants can't jump? I listened, wondering if the man had already had enough of Early's questions. I cannot say I've seen it for myself, answered the man. But if one had a good reason to, he might figure out a way, no? He spoke with an accent, and his words bobbed up and down like a whale skimming above and below the surface of the water. His voice was clear and full of feeling. What the feeling was, I couldn't say. It reminded me of the church bells you'd hear from a distance back home, and how sometimes those bells could call you to a funeral just as surely as a wedding. Sadness or joy, strange how those bells could toll for both. Good reason like what? Early asked. If you wanted something that was just out of reach, if you think you could jump for it? I couldn't be sure where the man was from. He said dat for that and tink for think. But whoever he was, he had a way with Early. I don't know if the strange boy from Morton Hill had ever been asked what he thought. Early pondered the question. If he wanted it bad enough. Oh, yeah. Did you know that the largemouth bass isn't a largemouth bass? It's a sunfish, Early said. You don't say. I've never heard such a thing in all my life. My curiosity got the better of me. I ventured out of the back room, drawn to the warmth, the smells, the voices. There, by a great stone fireplace sitting on a very sturdy wooden crate, sat the biggest, baldest, bare-chested man I'd ever seen. He looked up and met me with the somber eyes I recognized from the river. Land's sakes, little man, you gave us a scare, the man said. Yeah, Jackie, Early piped in. You shouldn't have gone out in the river like that. It's dangerous. If Gunner hadn't been nearby, you'd have drowned. Plus, your clothes are still wet. He gestured to my denim shirt and soggy backpack hanging near the fireplace. The man's, Gunner's, much larger shirt hung drying on the other side. It is true, Gunner said, but today you do me a great favor. I do? I said, wondering how his saving my life could have done him a favor. Oh, yes, I catch many fish in my life, but the Lord, he say, follow me and become fishers of men. Today I go out and catch me one. His shoulders shook with the rumble of laughter. I must have looked as dumbfounded as I was, because the great bald man stood, his head nearly brushing the ceiling, and his width blocking almost the whole of the fireplace, and stretched out a massive hand to me, taking my small one in his. Hello, young Mr. Jack. I'm Gunner Skoglund. Skoglund? Early repeated the last name, apparently hearing it for the first time. What kind of name is that? I thought it was a strange name too, but I wouldn't have pointed it out. Still, I waited for Mr. Skoglund's explanation. I come from Norway, a village near Oslo. Are you a Viking? Asked Early. Or do you know any? I suppose every Norseman is a Viking. We are boat people, voyages, seafarers. It is how I came to America. I work the docks in Portland, but that life is no longer for me, he said with a note of regret. Come on over here and let's have a look at that cut. I winced a little as he moved my hair to check the gash. Oh, yes, I need a stitch or two. It could have been a far sight worse, I'll give you that. He motioned for me to sit on a smaller crate. I did. Then Gunner Skoglund moved around the cluttered cabin like a great bull, but somehow managed to disturb nothing. He came to the fireplace with a jug, probably, of whiskey, and a needle and thread. My fingernails dug into the sides of the wooden crate. Stitches, he'd said. Don't you worry, said Gunner. I had stitches once before, one on my knee, but the doctor, he gave me an anesthetic that numbs the skin, and I barely feel a thing. Gunner popped the cork out of the jug. Maybe he planned to get me so liquored up that I wouldn't feel the pain, but instead of pouring me a jigger, he took a clean rag and soaked a corner in the liquid. Of course I knew what was coming next. He put that rag right on the gash on my forehead. It hurt like a son of a gun. I pressed my lips together and only yelped a little. All this was being done to a running stream of questions and commentary from Early. What are you doing with that needle, Gunner? Are you going to sew up Jackie's head? I had a hole in my pants one time and I sewed them up, but then I couldn't get them zipped anymore. Do you think if I brought me my pants, you could fix them? Gunner remained silent, leaving Early's questions unanswered as he placed the needle in a pair of tongs and held it to the fire again. The sight of it nearly made me pass out all over again. Now then, he said, I do believe I need my glasses. The glasses on the nightstand. I'll get them. I jumped up and made a beeline. While you are there, could you check the bookshelf? There's a medical journal that should have instruction for the proper conferment of stitches. Was he kidding? I tried to gauge his tone, listening for a hint of a smile or smirk to let me know he was just pulling my leg. The glowing needle had burned its image into my mind, and I was in no hurry to see it again, so I scanned the bookshelves looking for any type of medical guide. Proper conferment of stitches? Who talks like that? I studied the titles, and the answer came to me. People who read Plato's dialogues, Philo of Alexandria, Dante's Inferno, Aesop's Fables. I recognized some of these titles from my mother's book collection at home, and others I'd seen in the library at Morton Hill. Still, this display of books reminded me of something else. I took one off the shelf, then another, touching their embossed covers and smelling their pages. Robin Hood, I'd read that one. The Confessions of St. Augustine, I hadn't read that one. Romeo and Juliet, that was a love story. I would never read that one. They were all hardbound volumes, old and worn, but lining the shelves like trophies. That was it. Like the National Geographic said, you can tell a lot about a person by what they enshrine. This was Gunner's Shrine, and it reminded me of the trophy case at Morton Hill. These books with their tales of valor, love, sacrifice, and mystery. These books were special and important. Do you find it? Gunner called. It is on the second shelf, next to Frankenstein. A shudder ran down my spine. There it was, the Alfred Medical Manual, right next to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Frankie Daniels had been Frankenstein's monster last Halloween. His mother had drawn a huge scar with ragged stitches across his forehead. Hopefully, the medical manual would provide better instructions for the proper conferment of stitches than the ones Frankenstein used. But it was the small, rose-colored volume, 2 books down from Frankenstein, that caught my attention. It stuck out at an angle, just begging to be looked at. I pulled it from the shelf. The Journal of Poetry by Young Americans. Figures, I thought. What else is a pink book going to be? I'm not a fan of poetry, unless it's the kind that starts with, "There was once a man from Nantucket," so I gave it only a brief flipping through. There was an inscription on the inside cover, "To Gunner, love, Emmeline." This was getting gushier by the minute. Then I noticed a paper peeking out from its pages. I knew it was snooping, but I opened the folded sheet. It had a handwritten letter dated June 5th, 1938.